For the longest time, I have been saying that Europe is where the financial troubles are going to start, and there is reason for saying that. If you go back and look at how the euro was formed, it's a very interesting story in itself. First, there was something called as the exchange rate mechanism, and if you remember, I talked to you about how Soros made his first billion by shorting the United Kingdom pound. Why did he do that? Because the UK pound had said that it would maintain its value in a range that was within the exchange rate mechanism. The only problem with that was that to do that, the UK pound had to be overvalued. Everybody knew that it was overvalued and that it is going to be losing its power. So what happened was everybody bet, after seeing that Soros had done it first, that the UK pound was going to lose value. So when people see pressure on a currency, what happens? That country will say, okay, I'm going to give you more if you want to invest in my country because my pound, my currency is under pressure. So they kept bumping up the interest rates. Like for example, we'll give you 8% a year, 10% a year and so on. Yet people kept shorting the UK pound, and then finally they gave up and allowed the UK pound to find its market value, which means it crashed. This happened during the time of John Major, leading to his resigning his post as a prime minister. But it also made a new billionaire, and that was George Soros. Guess what? The current Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, he worked with Soros all through that time up until 2000. And it is believed that he made some money in that deal, and he also lost money along with Soros when they tried to do the same thing to the Russian ruble in the 90s, late 90s. Anyway, that story for a different day. So exchange rate mechanism 1 was in vogue, and then it had some formulas that was computed, and it was tied to European currency unit. So on 31st December 1998, the euro was announced and people were given a certain amount of time to come on board, and what happened and how this whole system of euro is rickety, I'm going to share. This is going to be actually 2 infographics because there's good information captured in one and more information in the other. So I'm going to give you both. Just stay with me, just understand how this whole thing was designed with a flaw, a major flaw. And I'm going to explain to you what that major flaw was. Here we go. Who was Parashurama, who led a life of devotion, dedication and daring? Why did he take birth on the earth? Was it to eradicate corrupt Kshatriya rulers who had become tyrannical and oppressive, or was it to bestow daya for the needy? So you had 20 different countries. Initially, let's say only 10 countries were there, and each one had their own currency, right? So how does one compare one with the other? So there was something called as a exchange rate mechanism that was brought, ERM1, and that fixed the values of how much a particular currency would rate in this European currency unit, which was a basket of currencies of the members. And this was on 31st of December 1998. The anchor rule was that anything that was valued in ECU, the same thing will transfer over to euro, meaning 1 ECU is equal to 1 euro. What this 1:1 swap ensures that is that the euro started with the same external value as the ECU, locking in all the member currencies. For example, 1 euro equaled 1.95583 German marks permanently. That means the exchange rate between the individual currencies of these 20 countries, it is permanently pegged. You cannot change the exchange rate. You cannot make it go up or down based on how well it is performing as an economy. That is the first problem. I'll explain to you a second bigger problem. Now let's take a look at an example, right? So what happened? Let's say there was debt. That debt did not get consolidated, and I'll explain to you in more detail when I come to the second infographic on what was consolidated debt and why that also poses a problem. Now, how was debt reconciled? Meaning, like supposing that there was a $1 million French bond in francs. Okay, so what happens is you need to take that value and apply it to what was the value versus the ECU or EUR, euro. The fixed rate was that for every euro you needed 6.55957 francs, French francs. So what happens is the same bond that was a $1 million in francs now becomes a euro 152,449 $0.02 bond. The same 1 million bond now becomes euro 152,449.02. Bond is the same except the value on the face of it changes from franc to euro. So you with me so far, right? So when the euro kicked in, the exchange rate mechanism also got upgraded and they called it ERM2. ERM1 was with ECU, ERM2 is with EUR. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what happened when this kind of an agreement was arrived at. Remember viewers, there are two things that every country has in its control. Two things that can either make the economy go faster or slow down an overheating economy because of inflation concerns. So what happens is, first there is a central bank that sets the monetary policy, which means it sets the interest rates lending between different banks, and if there is a feeling that the economy is slowing down, then they lower these rates. That makes it cheaper to take loans and therefore that could stimulate growth. But that is just the monetary aspect of it. There is something called as a fiscal aspect of it. What does the government in power in that country do when its central bank lowers its interest rate? They in turn will come in with a fiscal policy wherein they'll announce corporate rebates, saying that if you invest so much money in this particular area, we are going to give you so much of a rebate on your taxes. Or they might give you a tax holiday. If you start a new company for 5 years, we won't charge you any taxes, or something else. You basically, what it means is that once you have something new up and running, we are going to give you all these subsidies. So that is the fiscal policy. So between the monetary policy and fiscal policy, you are supposed to be able to spur growth. This is when the economy is slowing down. Let's take the reverse or the converse. In the converse, what happens is the economy is going very fast, but it is driving up inflation. And therefore, what happens is the central bank will increase the interest rates, thereby trying to make it harder for people to borrow from the banks. And in turn, the fiscal policy, which is the fiscal equivalent, the government of that day will start removing all these subsidies. Then instantly it starts cooling down. In 6 months' time, these things will cool down. So this is how these two are supposed to work. Now take this basic principle and start thinking, how would it apply to a system where there is one European central bank, then there are 20 country central banks, meaning like the French central bank, the German central bank, names may be different. You just get the idea. Now, how is this monetary policy, fiscal policy thing going to play out when you have a system like this? That's what we are going to discuss in this next infographic. It's very, very important because this is why things are so bad in Europe, and that's why they are itching to go for war, because they don't think they can pay the pension payments of many people who have put into the pension system, but now they don't have enough money going around to pay for the pensions of many of these retirees. People are living longer, therefore the pensions are lasting longer, and fewer people are joining the workforce and therefore less money is going into the system. This is a huge spiral into which people are falling in and there is no escape. So second infographic coming up. I hope you already liked this video. Here we go. Here comes the Eurozone dilemma. Do 20 countries act as one? Do they have the same monetary and fiscal policy? Now you understood the monetary and fiscal policy aspects of any economy, right? So let's take a look at who is controlling the monetary policy for the 20 members that use the euro. The answer is yes, it is being controlled by the European Central Bank that is based out of Frankfurt, Germany. What are the powers of this ECB? It sets the interest rates, borrowing costs. It also sets the rate of printing money supply, and it also manages foreign reserves. The reality is it's a one size fits all. The interest rate set for Germany is the same for Greece, even if their economies need different things. So monetary policy is completely under the control of the European Central Bank. For all the 20 countries, the monetary policy is the same. So now what happens is, what happens to the fiscal policy? What about the fiscal policy? These are independent. Each country can have its own fiscal policy. What does that mean? They can tax their citizens in any which way they want, income tax or value added tax and so on. The government spending varies from country to country, and also issuing national debt, they issue national debt in bonds. But these bonds are not issued in European Central Bank bonds. These are not Euro bonds. These are for that particular country, like the Lira bonds or the Deutsche Mark bonds and so on and so forth. Or it's called, I think, Bundesbonds, whatever it is, right? So each country decides its own budget. Now, France can spend heavily on social programs while Ireland can cut corporate taxes. So this is a very interesting situation. So what happens is, then how do you maintain some kind of a control mechanism in between these things? Like, for example, country A, which has a lower rate of borrowing from its bank, borrows it from that bank and takes that money and deposits in country B, which has a higher interest rate. We told you about that. Carry trade is exactly that. Then what should prevent countries among these 20 European countries from preventing this kind of thing from happening? I don't know, but this is what they put as guardrails so that there is some amount of stability and growth in all these economies. And what is that? This is actually a document that has been given by somebody called Maastricht, and there are 6 rules. Of the 6 rules, the main rules are that you maintain your annual deficit to 3% or less of your GDP. Whatever be your GDP, your deficit cannot exceed more than 3%. And also, your total debt cannot exceed 60% of this GDP. Unfortunately, these rules are frequently broken by member states without severe punishments. What happened in 2010 to Greece is something that I'll dwell on in a separate monologue, because that shows there are basically problems in this euro system. What are the 20 nations that share the currency but keep their own budgets? Austria, Belgium, Croatia, Cyprus, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Ireland, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malta, Netherlands, Portugal, Slovakia, Slovenia, and Spain. And here are all the references, and I'm going to give you the references as part of the description section. But it gives you an idea. This whole thing is rickety. And the main thing here was, when the euro was formed, the debt of the member countries was not consolidated. And all they said was, we are just going to let you convert based on the ECU. 1 ECU is equal to 1 EUR. So whatever was the exchange rate mechanism, which was in force for a few years prior to that, that's how you will be. That don't tell us anything about your debts. So some countries that had huge debts didn't know how to pay them because there was no money coming in, so they wanted to print notes. But being a member of euro, you cannot print notes, right? Therein lies the rub. And I'm going to talk about that as to the problem of Greece in 2010, and that will be a separate monologue. I hope you liked what I did here. It is a little bit hard grinding, but I wanted to make it as simple as possible for everybody to understand how these two things, monetary policy and fiscal policy, work, and how when one country or one entity controls the monetary policies of 20 different countries, but let them do whatever their fiscal policy is, that could lead to a bit of a mess, and which is what Europe finds itself in today. Thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. Namaskar.